Hello, my friends. Today we are continuing with part 2 of our tutorial on making selections in Photoshop. So in the first part of this tutorial, I basically did a demonstration in which I showed you how to shoot the images for the objects that you'll be cutting out in such a way that it will be a lot easier for you to select them and cut them out in Photoshop. So today we're going to continue that by actually bringing those images into Photoshop and showing you the different ways that you can select these objects. So we'll begin with this first image that we took here, which is of the orchids. And there are several different ways that we can cut this orchid out of its background. We will start by looking at the channels layer, or I'm sorry, by looking at our channels. So over here next to your layers panel, we have our channels. If you for some reason don't have this channels panel open, you can go up to window and select channels and it'll open it up for you. Now we're going to click through the different channels here, and what we're looking for is contrast. We're looking for the one that has the most contrast between the background and our subject, and that is definitely, I think, going to be this one here, which is the green channel. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this layer. So we're just going to right click on the green channel and choose duplicate channel, and we can call it green copy. That's fine, it doesn't really matter. So we'll click OK. So now we have a copy of our green channel. We're going to go to that and we'll turn off our green channel. And then we are going to do a levels adjustment on this copy of the green channel that we've made. So you can do that by going to Image Adjustments and choosing Levels, or you can just click Command L and now you've got your levels adjustment. So we're going to pull up the slider for the shadows in the image until we see our subject get really nice and dark. And then we're going to pull down the highlight slider until we see our background get nice and bright white again. So I think that looks good right about there. And as you can see, we already have a pretty good selection here just based on that simple act of just pulling those sliders around on this channel. So we're going to click OK. And now we're going to click on the RGB channel here so that we'll go back to our regular RGB mode. And then we're going to make our selection active. So we're going to do that by holding Command and clicking here on the selection that we made. And there we go, we've got our selection. So we're going to go back to our layers panel. I'm going to unlock my background and I'm going to make this selection into a layer mask by just clicking the layer mask button here. So as you can see, we actually had selected the background. So our selection is basically inverted. So we need to invert this mask that we just added, and we'll do that by clicking Command I. And there we go. Now we have our orchids selected, and we just need to clean up our selection a tiny bit. So we're going to hold Option and click on our mask, and then we're going to zoom in and we're going to get our brush. And I'm going to paint in white here, so I'm just going to get my white brush, make sure I have it on normal mode, and I'm going to paint back in these little sort of noses that the orchids have. I feel like orchids look like little lions, and these are kind of like their little lion noses. So I'm just going to paint those back in. The reason that these did not get selected is because they are white on this particular orchid. So it was reading that as white just like it was reading the white background. So now you can see that this is already a really, really good selection, a very clean selection a very precise selection, and that is exactly what we want. So we are going to do just a tiny bit more cleanup here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use overlay mode. So I'm going to change the mode on my brush to overlay, which I can do here by going up to this menu for mode. Or I can also hold shift and click either the plus or the minus button to scroll through the different modes until I find the overlay mode. And now I still have my brush in white, which is what I want, and I'm just going to kind of clean up this edge here. So what the overlay mode does is it makes it so that if you're painting in white, it will just apply to the white areas. That way, if you're painting outside the lines, for example, it's not going to mess anything up. So this is just a really nice way of being able to clean up your mask without having to go to a lot of precise trouble of making sure you're getting those edges right. So I'm just going to kind of run it around the whole thing just to make sure that we've got everything in there that we want, and I'll do it up here too. And that's probably just fine. So now we're going to hold Option and click our mask again so that we can go away from our layer mask and just look at the image. And as you can see, this is already a really, really good selection. Nice, clean, really perfect selection. And this is because we shot this on the white background, right? That makes it so that Photoshop can easily identify the contrast there and makes it much easier for you to select your objects. So one way that we could check the selection just to see if it really is as clean as it looks here is by adding a layer below our current layer. So we'll hold Command and click New Layer, and then we will fill that layer with black. So I'm going to do that by just hitting Command Delete because I already have black as my background color. And there we go. So now we can see that this really is a very clean, very precise selection of these orchids. And there's a few things that we might want to get rid of. So maybe we want to get rid of this stake that the orchid is attached to. For this right here, I mean, you could probably just use something like the lasso tool. So we could use the lasso tool to just select here, just kind of roughly, and then we can make sure that we are on our orchid layer and delete that. And it's not perfect, but it more or less gets rid of it. We will still need to do a tiny bit of cleaning up on this anyways. If you wanted to get even more precise, you could use the pen tool to remove some parts here. And that makes it a little cleaner. So we could do something like that here as well, and here as well. And then one thing that you'll need to keep in mind is if you're using this selection on a scene that has a light background, then you probably won't need to worry about this. But if you're using it in a scene that has a dark background, like this black one that we have it on now, you are going to have to do something about this white halo that it has from the background it was selected off of. And no matter how precise of a selection you have, this is going to be something that you'll encounter. The objects will always have a little touch of that color from whatever background they've come off of, just as a slight halo around them. That's just something that will happen no matter what you do. And an easy way to get rid of that is just to create a new layer and clip it to your object layer and just use like a brush or stamp tool to fix that outer edge there so that the color blends with the rest of the object. So that's it. That's a super, super simple way to select these orchids. So if you were going to use these, here I'm just going to delete this. If you were going to use these in another image, you would just come in here. You can just select everything since we have it masked out here, copy it and paste it into your new image, and that's it. Now let's look at another way that we can do this. And that would be using the color range. So I'm going to unlock my background layer again, and we'll go up here and we're going to choose select color range. So what you would do, this is already kind of, here, mess it up. Okay. What you would do then is when you come in here, you'll take your eyedropper and you will select your white background. And as you can see, it's already almost perfectly selected. Everything will add, so we'll choose the adding eyedropper, and we'll just make sure that any variation in the white is picked up there. And you can change the fuzziness, so you can pull the fuzziness slider up or down. Basically, when you add to the fuzziness or you increase the fuzziness, you're making it so that it's going to be picking up more similar tones in that range. And when you decrease the fuzziness, you're making it more precise so that it's only really selecting the exact tones that you've clicked on with your eyedropper. So that can help you to get a nice precise selection here, but this already looks really good. So I'm just going to click OK. And there we have our selection. And again, this is a selection of the background of the white area. So if we hit Shift Command I, that'll inverse our selection, and now our orchids will be selected. And again, we can click our layer mask and add that mask, and then we'll just do the same process that we did before. We'll option click on the mask to open it up. We'll get our brush. We'll make sure that we have it in the normal mode, and we'll just paint over those little orchid noses again, make sure that they are selected. Oops. And if you want to increase and decrease the size of your brush, you can just hit the bracket keys. So the left bracket will make it smaller, the right bracket will make it larger. And this I actually think that the color range in this instance worked better, because this is an even cleaner, even nicer selection than the one that we got from the channels mode. And so we'll option click to come out of our mask. And there we go. We have our really nice, really clean selection, and we're ready to copy this and use it in another image. So let's go ahead and close this one and look at our other images. So I actually want to start with this one. Here we go. So this is the second image we shot. So I'm going to unlock my background layer. And this one, we're going to use the magic wand tool. So I'm going to do that by clicking W. You can also find it up here. So this is the magic wand here. And I am going to just click on that white background. And as you can see, it's selected all of that white area. Anything that it misses, you can just come and click around here so that it'll get it. And so we've pretty much got this selected. Now we're just going to grab our lasso and make sure that we have this bottom area selected as well. I think I kind of missed the spot here. Okay. So that's pretty good already. So we're gonna Shift Command I to invert our selection. Now we will need to clean this up a little bit, and really a good way to do that here would just be, again, with the lasso tool. So this kind of has an irregular edge, so it doesn't really need to be very precise. So if we have our lasso tool open, which I already do, and we hold down Option, we can kind of just drag this around here and get rid of some of this area where this stand that it's on is getting added to our selection. And then we can do the same thing over here. And there we go. So really easy, again, just a super simple selection. So one thing that you should do, and we didn't do that on the last one, but we'll do it here, is we want to do the select and mask dialog just to kind of clean up our selection. So when you're using something like the channels or the color range, sometimes you don't really need to do this because you already get a super, super precise selection. But with something like the magic wand tool, it may not be quite as precise. So we'll go into select and mask, and we can do that a few different ways. You can choose select, select and mask. If you have a selection tool open already, you'll also have an option to just click here to open the select and mask dialog, or you can click Option Command R, and that will open it up for you as well. And so once we're in here, we can kind of zoom in and just see how our selection looks. And it actually already looks really good. The only thing that I would say is maybe I'll smooth it out just a tiny bit. So I'm gonna smooth it to about 15, and then we'll contrast, set the contrast to about 30. And that's all I'm really gonna do here. And I'm just going to click OK. And there's our selection. So again, we can hit our mask, and there we go. Now we have our skull, or our driftwood that looks like a skull, selected and ready to be cut out and taken into another image. So let's go and take a look at our final object here, and that was this piece of coral. So this time we're going to use the quick selection tool. So the quick selection tool and the magic wand are under the same sort of family of tools. So I will also find that here, but instead of selecting magic wand, I'll select quick selection tool. You can also hit W to find it, and if you want to change between the different tools, you can hit Shift W to switch between the different tools here that are in the quick selection tool family. So I'm going to go ahead and make my brush size a little bit larger, and all I'm going to do is just drag this around my coral, and it's going to select it as I'm doing that. And if I need to get into a tighter area, I'll change my brush size as I just did, and I'm just sort of clicking on some spots that it didn't really get. And then if you hold Option, that will allow you to deselect anything that needs to be deselected. And that's pretty much it. We've already got it selected. One thing that I will do is, I think there is an actual hole in the coral here, so I'm going to hold Option and just click there and get rid of that little black area. And so for this one, I definitely will do the select and mask dialog. So we'll just go ahead, since I have my quick selection tool open, this option is here. So I'll just click select and mask here at the top, and then I'll zoom in. And again, this is an object with a slightly irregular edge. So that means that it doesn't have to be super precise because of that. One thing that I will do here is I'll take this tool, which I think it's called like the Refine Selection Brush. I'm not positive if that's correct, but it's this second brush that you find here. And I'm just going to kind of paint along the top edge, because that's going to sort of perfect that edge for me and make sure that I'm getting less of the sort of halo from the background on this. So I'm just kind of dragging it along that top edge. And that will sort of do its thing. And if there's a couple like little spots that you feel like it didn't quite get, you can kind of go back over those And then I'll do the same on the other side. And there we go. That looks pretty good. So now I'm just gonna, this one is just like a regular brush. It behaves just like your regular brush, and it has like an adding and a subtracting mode. So it's going to start out in the adding mode. So if there's a couple spots where I feel like I kind of just missed some, I can kind of brush in there and bring that back. And again, this doesn't have to be super precise because this coral has a very irregular edge, so it's okay if it looks a little irregular. Okay, so I already think I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm just gonna zoom out. Now, the last couple things that I will do is I'm gonna smooth it just a tiny bit. We'll do like 10 because the edge on this really, oh, I think I did 15. Let's do 10. The edge on this really isn't that smooth to begin with. I don't know why it's not. Okay, there we go. It doesn't want to listen to me. Okay, and now we'll add contrast to about 30%. And then we'll click OK. And there we have our selection. We'll unlock our background layer and we'll add this as a layer mask. And as you can see, we already have a really great selection of our coral. So the mere fact that we planned ahead and shot these images in such a way that we were paying attention to contrast and making sure that there was enough contrast between the background and the objects that we were photographing made it so that this selection process in Photoshop was much, much easier and much, much quicker. So I hope that this helps you to both do the actual selecting of objects in Photoshop and also to plan your composites in such a way that you're going to make your life just a ton easier. So that is it for today, and thank you for joining me, and hopefully we'll have another tutorial on selections again soon. Maybe we'll do one where we explore some trickier selections so you can get an idea of how to deal with situations where maybe you just can't set things up in such a way that you're going to have that nice contrast that you need. All right, so thank you and see you next time.